With technology, I'm going to switch to our next amazing speaker, Monica Stevenson. Welcome to have you here.
Thank you so much, Haley, and thank you for that compliment. Amazing. I appreciate it. I am so grateful that you have invited me, and I am excited this afternoon to speak briefly.
I am so glad to have you here. I'm going to go ahead and give you the stage if that's okay.
Oh, that's fine. Thank you. Hey, everyone. I am Monica Stevenson of the Sole Purpose of the Carolinas. And I was in a workshop not too long ago. And I want to start off with this. And I hope you all just take a minute to process it and answer it. No matter how seemingly small, how is your life better? So it's a very, for me, a powerful question because sometimes we get so caught up in our everyday frenetic lives and we forget to take a time to just breathe. So I want to come in today and talk a little bit about trauma, especially as it relates to sometimes implementing our businesses, getting our businesses started. Sometimes it's those things that prevent us from moving forward. I am a mental health specialist for the past 30 years and a school psychologist for the past 25. So in my journey in this field, I have seen a lot of trauma, especially with children, and it's certainly post-pandemic. So we always start, we just want to relax because hopefully none of this is triggering, but hopefully it'll be enlightening to you to remind yourselves to kind of on your healing journey, remember to give yourself some grace. So we take deep breaths anytime you want to. Hold that thing for 3 or 4 seconds and just let it out. So what is trauma? Trauma is the psychological or physical experience or event that can impact our safety, our trust, and our threat response. We'll feel triggered, like we want to immediately emote and get upset about something. And more importantly, it disrupts the connection with ourselves and others. And in business, as so many of the other previous speakers spoke about being courageous, making sure you're dedicating time and your mindset, those certainly can impact our businesses. So for this talk, I'm going to just talk about 3 types of trauma very briefly. The one type of trauma is acute, and that would be one event, one significant event, like when my mom passed. That was so traumatic for me. That was an acute event for me. However, I still have prolonged sorrow that I have to deal with. Then there's the chronic trauma event. That is, not only is it prolonged, but it's repeated. So something that's occurring over and over again, like, for example, domestic violence. And then we have the complex trauma, which of course is there are multiple layers of trauma. For example, some of the students that I work with, not only do they have housing insecurities, they may be in an abusive relationship with one of their boyfriends or girlfriends, or an abusive relationship with their parents also. So we have a lot of that. So that's complex. So the characteristics that I see with those students, and then I'm going to shift back, you all will see, that's maltreatment. Some characteristics that we sometimes see is maltreatment, the violence exposure, depriving care environments, as well as adverse situations. But for us who are entrepreneurs, sometimes it's the little T's, the little traumas, those little voices in the back of our heads that give us the self-doubt that we can't seem to move to the next phase. And I like what the first speaker said. She talked about when she first started her business, she dedicated that 1 hour. And that is so awesome because, as you know, when our minds get cluttered with trauma that we have not addressed, then we are not able to move forward. And we call that sometimes the echoes, the symptoms of trauma. That could be a thought, it can be a feeling, it can be something, a smell that can trigger you, a memory, a flashback, a horrible night terror, or a depression. anxiety, and isolation. All of that can interrupt and impact us as we are beginning, or even because I'm just beginning my for me, my business. It's just 2 years old, but I do sometimes get the nagging feeling because I want to be a millionaire by now, but I'm just not. And I also want to impact people. I love speaking. I love speaking on trauma. I love speaking on equity and diversity. So some of these things, it's just not coming to fruition yet. But I also know that it is important for me to always address myself and where I am. And with that, we oftentimes have trauma responses. So a trauma response is how we react to something that happened. For example, we can do a flight response, an avoidance behavior. We can do a fight response and get into an aggressive bullying mindset, not an actual fight. But sometimes that behavior will be controlling in our conduct. The gentleman, I didn't hear everything that he was saying, but I know he was talking about perfectionism. And I'm sure that he talked about how perfectionism can stick us. It can stick us to the point where we can't move to the next thing. We can, the flight, the freeze, the OCD, being controlling, that is more of the fight response. So, and also the fawn response. We want to be of a help to other people, and we reduce ourselves and we put away our needs to help someone else. So we need to be very, very careful about how the little T's or some of the echoes impact us as we are navigating our businesses, and how, if they're not going the way we want them to go, how we can continue to move forward despite those little T's and those echoes that we can find ourselves in sometimes. Also, I want to talk about just a little bit some of the behaviors for the fright response. Some of these have association with the foggy brain. You can't remember. I remember the second speaker, Miss I'm sorry, I don't remember her name, but she said, which is my point exactly. She said at 78, I just can't remember things. Well, it happens all the time. So it doesn't matter what age, but a flight response will also sometimes give you a foggy brain and a difficulty making decisions, difficulty taking actions. So I wanted to tell her that is just not an age thing. Sometimes it's just a behavior characteristic of what's going on with us. And the fawn response also, sometimes when we want to kind of diminish, especially women, sometimes we will put everyone else's needs before our own. And that fawn response can manifest as being codependent, staying in relationships, but more importantly, the loss of self. And as entrepreneurs, it is so important that we don't lose ourselves, because then we get stuck. So part of, for me, moving forward when we're in those stuck elements of not feeling adequate, people talk a lot about the imposter syndrome, pretending who we are when we really do know what we're talking about. But there's those, again, the echoes that prevent us. So we, number one, in terms of making sure that we are healing on our journey, we face what's going on. We face what happened, that little echo in the back. Why did it? We can't always determine why it happened, but we certainly can determine how we move forward from it. We tend to our pain. What is your self-care like? Are you please not waiting until Saturday or Sunday to do self-care? I was being interviewed for a board the other day, and they asked me what was my self-care. And I explained to them, I do self-care several times throughout the day because I have to. There's no need, because we live in a frenetic world. And anytime you're in the helping profession, you have to take care of yourself in order to help others. So I do self-care throughout the day, and whether that's taking a small walk, working out heavily, taking several deep breaths, reading something by Joel Osteen or a Bible verse, meditating, whatever it is so important that we take several breaks throughout the day for that self-care. And then we tend through the pain a lot of times. If you need therapy, it is very important. I think it's one of the most cathartic things in the world to talk to a therapist or a coach in a very non-threatening and a very safe environment where you can talk about some of the things that you've been going through, and just have somebody not necessarily give you the solution, but guide you through that problem so that you can come up with a viable solution for yourself. Also, when we're talking about trauma and little trauma echoes, forgiveness. Sometimes we know that we don't forgive others for them, but we really forgive others for ourselves so that we can be able to move on. And if you need to make amends, sometimes we have to think about how can we make amends in order for our lives to be better, and whether that is making amend to yourself, making amend to the person or the event that offended you. But it's important to do that also, and whether that's verbally through a letter, maybe you never even send it, but at least it's written down so that you're on your healing journey, and so that that business can bloom, because the more we know ourselves, the more we deal with some of the things that we deal with, the better we're going to be. Also, we have to honor how we feel. It doesn't matter if we're not feeling good that day. It is okay to feel that way. A feeling is a feeling. We honor all of our feelings. It's depleting, however, to continue to feel a certain way without any intervention, without doing your self-care. If you need additional assistance, without seeking that additional assistance. I know one of this, Miss Sayre, I believe it was, she talked about being courageous. And sometimes that courage means taking the step out and doing something that you've never done before to facilitate your own healing. You have to find ways during those times when those echoes come to remain calm and focused. Because if not, sometimes we go down a rabbit hole. I'm not good enough. My business is not working. What do I need to do? I've done all I can. And once we get into that rabbit hole and that abyss of depression and anxiety, it's hard to climb out of. So it is important for us to always find ways to be preventative. And whether you write it down, when this trigger happens, when this echo happens, this is what I'm going to do to stay calm and focused. I'm going to take a deep breath. I'm going to call a friend of mine. I'm going to read. I'm going to pray. Whatever it is for you to be preemptive during those times. Learning to maintain that calmness in response to those triggers. That is so very important, because anything can sometimes remind us of something that happened, or something that happened a long time ago. I know that I was in a trauma training, and the trainer was talking about how when she was a little girl, she was a gymnast, and she did her best. However, she did not win. And her stepfather came to her and said, "Wow, you're not going to place." Well, that was a traumatic event for her. Even though she didn't win, it was always in her mind that during her other meets that I may not do good. However, I do want to say that sometimes trauma fuels us in the opposite direction. A traumatic event can also be very viable to us and go ahead and fuel us into greatness. I know that about 10 or 12 years ago, my job was being altered, and we were told some very demeaning things. And I remember saying to myself, this is very traumatic for me. I went out and bought, I love clean clothes. I know this is going to sound crazy, but I bought detergent and I bought Vienna sausages and the ramen noodles because I was like, I'm not going to have money and I won't be able to eat, but I have to have clean clothes. And so, but it fueled me. I went back and I got another degree. And this degree helps me with my business. So I don't want anyone to ever think that trauma cannot be turned around and fueled using that as the energizer to do great things in your life, because it certainly can. We have to find ways to be fully immersed in our businesses. And again, it is so difficult sometimes without the support that we need. Sometimes I find in my business that I don't know always what support meant, but the people that I thought would be very supportive have not always been supportive, I guess, in the way that I thought that they would be. So I am grateful to be able to be here to talk to a community of people, but it's also important to not only to determine who you are, what you need, if the echoes are preventing you from moving forward, who to reach out to. But it's also important that sometimes we have to understand what support means. And as I'm progressing through this, I understand now what I need support in. So that's very important, to surround ourselves with supportive people, supportive events, anything that can help us not only in our business, but I just really am a firm believer, in order for us to grow just any business, we have to be very conscientious of who we are, and especially deal with any past trauma or current trauma, because it will impact us in terms of our ability to proceed and progress. So I do want to leave you again. Practice those calming moments. Be preemptive. If you know that I have a good friend, she has night terrors. So we work around getting, when she wakes up, what is her strategy? So, and that helps me too, because I am very aware of my triggers. And so again, I want to leave you with, every day, no matter how seemingly small, how is your life better? And that sometimes will just focus you, because gratitude is the key. In this life, we have to be grateful for the smallest things. I know that I used to never think about this, but every time I pull into that garage, thank you, because I came back the way I left. So I am just honored again to be able to speak this afternoon, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being a speaker today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. If somebody wanted to get in touch with you, how would they go about finding you?
They can reach me at monica.soulpurpose@gmail.com. I also have a number, 980-206-0582. I am also a coach, because just like several speakers today, that's what I went back to get my other degree and certification in. So I do also do life coaching, but primarily I love to speak again about trauma, about a very diverse topics. So thank you again, Haley. This has been awesome.
Thank you. I appreciate you being here today.
Yes. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.